There's probably very few places in this country that aren't in some form of a housing crisis or another. And the solutions to the housing crisis aren't always articulated or implemented in a way that is intended to produce equitable outcomes. And so let's talk about what that might mean. Especially those who are most impacted by the housing crisis are those who may be lower middle class, lower income, people of color, or other people with an economic disadvantage. We need more middle housing. We need to legalize middle housing across America where it's currently illegal. That's a good start, and we've heard from that in a number of sessions throughout this Congress and previous Congresses that our CNU members are out there across the country engaging in trench warfare to try and legalize duplexes and ADUs, right? Are there things that can be done to do that faster? Well, yes, the West Coast is kind of showing us the way with state mandates to legalize middle housing in various ways. Another thing I want to talk about is that it's not enough to just think about housing. If we just wanted to solve the housing crisis, there's a template that could be used, and it's what happened after World War II. You just go out there and you bulldoze the natural landscape and you put in a bunch of subdivisions, and boom, you solve the housing crisis, right? There's cheap housing, anyone can afford it, right? The problem is that, CNU was founded to talk about the problem that results from that, right? So I don't think I need to tell you the problem statement about the sprawl. But the solution is we need to be thinking about housing as a part of an integrated planning approach. It's also looking at the economics of local communities, looking at the health outcomes of development patterns, looking at how do we plan for less traffic by not forcing people into cars for every trip. How can we plan for housing that's part of an integrated strategy to reduce water and energy use, improve air quality, and preserve those natural working lands? If we pave over all the farms so we can solve the housing crisis, what are we going to eat? Yeah. Equitable TOD. We've been doing transit-oriented development for a number of years now, since my former boss, Peter Calthorpe, first coined the term back in the 90s. But a lot of TOD is just for middle and high income households, right? Or it's for subsidized affordable. But can we provide for TOD that has housing options for people at every rung of the economic ladder, and also provides for people to start up a small business there? And it's not just the national chains that are populating the TOD. There's also, people talk a lot about displacement. If you revitalize a neighborhood, the biggest concern of lower income and people of color, existing residents of that neighborhood, is we're going to be displaced. We're not going to be able to enjoy the benefits of this revitalized neighborhood. So what are ways that we can get regulations out of the way to keep people in their existing homes when a neighborhood gets revitalized, so that they can share and enjoy the wealth that comes from revitalization? Cooperatives and land trusts allow people to gain and retain ownership of their housing assets, and also just legalize things like home sharing that can allow for more people to share the cost and the burden of housing and live together in community, and help to also, by the way, combat the loneliness epidemic that the Surgeon General has identified. We need zoning reform across the country, and we need zoning reform that also allows for economic vitality. Is it enough if we solve the housing crisis because we finally build enough housing units, but then people aren't able to grow economically? We need to be thinking about accessory commercial units and other ways to provide for the first rungs on the economic ladder, so people can start a business in a space that they can afford to operate a startup business in, and then grow it from there. And that's one way to provide for community-controlled communities, is community-owned and controlled housing. When you have a community land trust and you put a housing cooperative on it, that gives you a limited equity cooperative. So I'm going to just pause here for a sec, because I started talking about cooperatives yesterday, and someone said, "What do you mean cooperative?" So let's just back up basics. A housing cooperative is when you have a company that owns the land. That company is the cooperative and owns the apartment building, say. And then if you want to move into that apartment building, what you do is you actually purchase a share of that company. And the share in that company entitles you to live in one of the units, one of the homes in that apartment building. That's what a housing cooperative is. As opposed to a condominium, where you're making little legal rectangles around each one of those apartments, platting them with the county assessor and selling each one of those legal rectangles. So it's just a different way to provide for owning multifamily housing. You can also have cooperatives for trailer parks and other ways to provide for multiple people living on the same parcel of land. It's not really cool to discriminate against visitors and say we want them over there and the homeowners are over here. That is a form of discrimination. Community design standards are one way to empower people to have control over their own communities by saying, okay, you just upzoned my community by state fiat, but maybe I get to have a say in what the look and feel of that community is. Maybe me and my neighbors can get together and write some community design standards so that the homes that come out of the ground as a result of this state fiat are ones that we can love and we can see ourselves living in, or children living in, and we can like it. And you know, we really need 15-minute neighborhoods or 5-minute neighborhoods. We need walkable communities, whatever the name du jour is of that. I want to talk about the triage protocol, but I think we're just about close to the end of this session. So
those are my slides.
These are Patty's slides, and Patty turned us on to the triage protocol. But this is basically looking forward at all the places across the country and looking at those places that will likely die regardless of our efforts because they're in a floodplain or they're going to get burned out by fire, or those places are going to thrive without the investment of limited resources. They've got plenty of money. They can pay to adapt. Or those places where survival is likely if we provide the appropriate support to adapt. And then there's also type 0, Paradise, California, places that are already gone, right? So that's a triage protocol, is to be able to identify each place. What type of place is this, and what help does it need, or should it be helped? There's a lot of strategies beyond zoning. A lot of this is available on our website. We get into finance and regulation. We'll be talking a little bit more about this summer and this fall. We do a deeper dive into these topics. Equitable housing. All of these materials are available on the website, and I hope you're able to join us. When you hold a hard hat up to your ear and you listen really closely, you can hear the OSHA.